Here we have our model of the larynx. I just want to start by saying that this larynx is not true to size, and I am not artistic at all. So some of the cartilages and muscles, their placement is correct, but the actual shapes of them might be a little off. So in the larynx, we have 9 cartilages total. 3 of them are unpaired. That's the epiglottis, the thyroid cartilage, and the cricoid cartilage. And then 6 of them are paired. So we have the 2 arytenoids, the 2 corniculates cartilages, and the 2 cuneiform cartilages. And in this demonstration, I will only be going over 5 of those 9 cartilages, and then as well as the intrinsic laryngeal muscles, which are here in blue, that help the larynx move and be flexible. Okay, so first we have our hyoid bone. So the hyoid bone is actually the only bone in the larynx. It's located at cervical vertebrae 3, and it has these little horns that point up and backwards. You are slightly upwards and backwards, not perfectly shown in this model that they're pointing backwards, but they are. And so the hyoid bone is up here. It's also back here. It continues. You can see it on both sides. But there's 3 segments of the hyoid. We have the body, we have the greater horns, which are these 2 that point up, backwards and slightly upwards. And then there's also the lesser cornu, which is the part that points a little bit downwards. First cartilage, which is the epiglottis, which is right here. It is an unpaired leaf-like structure, and it's made up of elastic cartilage. So it's located just behind the hyoid bone, which you can see the hyoid bone there, and it's broad at the top, and then it gets narrow as it goes down. And the function of the epiglottis is to prevent food from entering the larynx during your swallow. And it does that by it kind of inverts down and closes the larynx so that food or other foreign bodies can't enter the larynx. But it actually contributes very little to speech unless there has been a total laryngectomy. So the next cartilage we have is the thyroid cartilage. You can see it here. It's this big one in the front, and it's made up of hyaline cartilage. So the thyroid cartilage is also unpaired, and it is actually the largest cartilage of the larynx. There is an anterior angle in the thyroid cartilage, like right here, and that's what we call our Adam's apple. So it's more prominent in men than in women. And then just superior to that, we have a V-shaped thyroid notch that you can actually feel on yourself if you palpate your larynx. And so the thyroid cartilage has 2 horns, and it's the superior horns, or I'm sorry, they're up here. Superior horns and the inferior horns. These attach to the cricoid cartilage, and then this attaches to the lateral thyroid hyoid ligaments. So there would be some ligaments in here attaching it to the hyoid bone. So then we move into our cricoid cartilage, which is down here, and it's a ring shape, so it goes all the way around. It's another unpaired hyaline cartilage, and it's the second largest cartilage of the larynx. So like I said, it's shaped like a ring, with the larger, broader part facing posteriorly. This is called the signet. And then anteriorly, there's the band, which is thinner, and the cricoid cartilage is attached to the trachea down here via ligaments. There would be ligaments all connecting it to the trachea. So then we move into our first paired cartilages. We have these 2 pyramid-shaped cartilages that are called the arytenoids. They kind of look like lungs on mine, but that's not what they actually, well, anyways. So they sit on top of the cricoid cartilage. So you can see they're just sitting right on top. And the arytenoids have 3 surfaces. They have 2 processes, a muscular and a vocal process, a base and an apex. And we will get more into what attaches to the arytenoid processes in a bit once we start to discuss the intrinsic laryngeal muscles. So we finally get down to the trachea, which is a hollow and flexible cylinder-shaped tube, also formed by hyaline cartilage. And so they're very flexible. The hyaline cartilage is flexible and it allows for movement of the trachea. So these rings are closed anteriorly and they open posteriorly in the back. And each ring, again, not true to size, is about 2 to 3 centimeters in diameter. And they're connected, each ring is connected to each other by a mucous membrane lining that's not shown on this model. So the trachea will eventually keep going down. It'll divide into 2 main stem bronchi and then continue dividing until we reach the respiratory bronchioles, and that's where the alveolar ducts are, and that's where gas is exchanged for respiration. Okay, so next we're going to get into our intrinsic laryngeal muscles. So intrinsic means that both the insertion and the origin of the muscles are within the larynx. So they help our larynx move and have that flexibility. So first we have our thyroarytenoid muscle, which is this little V-shaped guy in here, right over the opening to the airway. So the thyroarytenoid muscle is a paired muscle, and it makes up our left and right vocal folds. So there's 2 muscle bundles that make up the TA, which is another term for thyroarytenoid muscle. And it's the thyrovocalis and the thyromuscularis. So I showed it here with the 2 different colors. So the thyrovocalis is the yellow. It originates on the inner surface of the thyroid cartilage and inserts on the vocal process of the arytenoids. And contraction of the thyrovocalis draws the cricoid and thyroid cartilages apart, which tenses the vocal folds and raises the pitch. And then on the other hand, we have the thyromuscularis, which is the blue, and it originates on the thyroid cartilage just lateral, so it's more lateral to the thyrovocalis, and it inserts on the muscular process of the arytenoids. So contraction of the thyromuscularis draws the arytenoids forward, relaxing and adducting or closing the vocal folds. I just want to say, I know it looks like they're on the epiglottis, but they're not. They are on the thyroid cartilage. Okay, so the next muscle, intrinsic muscle we have is the cricothyroid muscle, which can be seen here and here. It's beautiful. And the cricothyroid is a paired muscle, but it is made up of 2 parts. So we have the pars recta and the pars oblique. So both parts are vocal fold tensors, and they both originate from the arch of the cricoid, but they insert into 2 separate places. So the pars oblique inserts near the thyroid lamina and the inferior horn of the thyroid cartilage, while the pars recta inserts into the lower surface of the thyroid lamina. So they have 2 functions. The pars recta contraction results in the thyroid cartilage tilting downwards, and the pars oblique contraction results in the thyroid cartilage being drawn forward. So what these actions do, the moving downwards and forwards, is it causes the distance between the anterior thyroid cartilage and the arytenoids we have back here to increase. So that this thyroid cartilage is moving forwards and downwards, that distance is increasing, and in result, that changes our pitch. So the cricoid thyroid muscle is the most important muscle for pitch. So next we have our lateral cricoarytenoid muscle, otherwise known as the LCA. So this is a paired muscle, and it plays the role of an adductor, meaning it closes the vocal folds. So the fibers of the LCA originate from the arch of the cricoid muscle, and they insert, these are these 2 muscles here. So it's kind of hard to see where it inserts, but it's on the arch of the cricoid, and it inserts into the lateral surface of the muscular process of the ipsilateral or same side arytenoid. So here's the arytenoids. So we have our LCAs right here. Here's our thyroarytenoid. And so what this does when the LCA contracts, the muscular process of the arytenoids are drawn forward, which pivots the arytenoids medially and causes the vocal folds to close. So these contract, these guys pivot forward and medially, and then our vocal folds are going to also move medially. So this also results in stiffening of all layers of the vocal folds. Next, we're going to go into our interarytenoid muscles, which we can find here. So this is the only unpaired intrinsic laryngeal muscle. So there's two muscle bundles that make up the interarytenoid muscles, which are the transverse arytenoid, the one underneath where it's just going left to right and it's unpaired. And then we also have the oblique arytenoid, which are paired, and that's the one making the crisscross pattern. So both of these bundles are used in adduction and medial compression of vocal folds. The transverse fibers, the one underneath, they originate from the lateral posterior surface of the arytenoid cartilage, and insert into the corresponding surface of the contralateral arytenoid. So it just goes from one to the other. Contraction of the transverse muscles draws the bodies of the arytenoids together. And then we have the oblique, which is the crisscross pattern looking muscle. It originates at the base of one arytenoid and inserts into the top of the opposite side arytenoid. So when the oblique arytenoids contract, it draws the apexes or the tops together, which adducts the posterior glottis. And then the last intrinsic laryngeal muscle that we'll go over is the posterior cricoarytenoid, which is also called the PCA. So this is a paired muscle, 1, 2, and it is the lone abductor muscle, meaning its function is to draw the muscular processes of the arytenoids posteriorly, causing it to pivot laterally, resulting in abduction or opening of the vocal folds and opening of the glottis. The fibers originate from the quadrate lamina of the cricoid, which is the big signet ring part, and it inserts into the muscular process of the ipsilateral or same side arytenoid. So that's these here. And again, these function of these is to abduct the vocal folds. All right, so next we will go into the vocal folds. The vocal folds have 5 layers. From superior to inferior, the layers are the epithelium, so the outermost layer, the superficial lamina propria, which is in green, the intermediate lamina propria, which is in yellow, the deep lamina propria, which is in orange, and then our vocalis muscle is here in pink. So I'm going to go dive a little deeper into each layer and what their function is. So starting with the outermost layer, the epithelium is thin and stiff, and it really is what maintains the shape of the vocal folds. Moving inwards, we have our superficial layer of the lamina propria. It's also referred to as Reinke's space, and this layer consists of loose fibrous components, which can be regarded or seen as a mass of like a soft gelatin material. Next, in the yellow, we have the intermediate layer of the lamina propria. So this consists of elastic fibers, and it's often compared to a bundle of just like soft, loose rubber bands. Going in a little bit deeper, we have the deep layer of the lamina propria, and it is made up of collagenous fibers, and it is often compared to a bundle of cotton thread. And then this pink part is our most inferior layer, which is the vocalis muscle, and it makes up the main body of the vocal folds. And it's often compared to stiff rubber bands. So the epithelium and the superficial layer, so these two, are very soft and pliable, and this is the portion, these two, that vibrate the most during phonation. And then as you go deeper, the intermediate deep layers are more rigid, and they don't vibrate as much during phonation. So this is really what vibrates of the vocal folds. These are more rigid and don't vibrate as much. And that is our vocal folds.